Welcome to the Great Old Ones channel. Here I talk about role playing games in general and a lot of RPG subtopics in specific. Tonight, I'm, well, or today, depending on what time it is that you're watching this, I'm not going to talk about the Role Master, which has been somewhat of the norm for other live streams that I've done. Tonight, I'm going to stick to my first love of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And to help me out with that this evening, I'm going to bring on another fellow Advanced Dungeons and Dragons lover by the name of Doom Swords. I do believe I put his link in the game the description here, so we can bring him on and get this party started. Welcome, Doom Swords.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going okay.
Good.
Well, as I alluded to, and part of our intro there, you are also another first edition Dungeons and Dragons lover, and because it's frankly, it's about one of the first games I ever started with. So I guess you
Yeah,
stick with what you know from there, right?
right.
And
Yeah, and that was one of the first that I got involved with as well. I think I was doing that, or at least got the Dungeon Master's Guide before I ever got the red box.
mhm, exactly, it's fantastic game. I think some of it was a little bit misunderstood, which is what we're going to have a little bit of discussion about tonight. Um, to help guide us on what we want to talk about, I went ahead and brought Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Initiative and Combat Table. This was compiled by a guy by the name of David Prata back in March of 2006, and here we are, March of 2026, talking about it again. It's a nice piece of work, definitely compiled all of the references that are scattered throughout the different books to try and, I guess, help people clarify what the rules were. Um, Again, this is one of those things. The Dungeon Master's Guide is a fantastic resource for gaming, but it wasn't exactly put together in a way that it helped put the rules in a logical order, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, for the most part, and I think I understand why. A lot of it was taken from elsewhere, expanded upon, worked on hastily by one individual, and a lot of that manuscript, I think, just ended up coming into the book in the stream of consciousness style that it was written, as
Yeah,
if you were sitting typing on a keyboard. And then I know there were contributions from others, and I think even his wife actually helped a
I
lot
wouldn't doubt it. Wouldn't
with
doubt it at
with
all.
taking the typewritten stuff and doing whatever needed to be done with it. But the nature of the DMG is it's not heavily edited. A lot of it is filling in blanks that filling in blanks from prior materials because of
Right.
course Monster Manual came out, Player's Handbook comes out, and then those were kind of flying blind, and the DMG had to guide it all together. And there's just fantastic information in there, but a lot of what gets lost, I think, is related to how the books intertwine. And better editing and that sort of thing would probably have helped with that. But I wouldn't do it over if it took all the character out of it, or any of the character really.
Oh no, no, not at all. I think one of the, if you look at it, I guess one of the main failings of it is I think when it was put together, he assumed everybody had played D&D, and they were just looking for the next step, as opposed
Right.
to re-explaining it all over again. He just went ahead and put everything together, and here, this is all my notes. Take them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but all of that stuff doesn't really matter because again, like you mentioned
Yeah.
with the ADDICT document, we're looking at that 19 years, 20 years, I guess now, just about 20 years later, and we're still talking about the DMG and AD&D 50 years later. So something must have worked.
Oh no, no, it's and again, I think you and I are of a like mind. We want to preserve these older games. They're fantastic games. Let's not let them fall by the wayside. Yeah.
Indeed. Yes, and that's true. Some of the most useful rule clarifications are in sub
Subnotes.
notes, yeah, on tables, you know, which is pretty crazy. And you if you haven't opened the DMG in a while, or if somebody hasn't opened the DMG in a while, and I mean, I've even been guilty of this in the past. If you haven't opened it up in a while, you look at this table and you'll find a really important piece of information. For example, say
Yeah.
that as monsters scale up in hit dice, they also gain the ability to hit creatures that normally require a magical weapon to hit. That's
Right.
that's stuffed under a table, so
No,
it's
exactly. Yeah. And you're
it's
looking for
interesting.
something specific and you're reading through this trying to find that other thing. But you notice this, which is really important to you as well. Yeah.
Right, right, that's hugely important.
Yep. It's definitely some good stuff. So let's dive into it here a little bit on the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Initiative and Combat table. We're going to start off with talking about initiative combat. It's probably the one of the most, I'd hate to use the word confusing, but when you're a kid trying to read this stuff, figuring this stuff out, it is confusing, right? It assumes that you have some knowledge of how well war games were run, and if you did that, this fell into place a whole lot easier.
Right, right. And of course, most of us didn't have much experience, especially those of us who were young when we got into this, didn't really have much experience. Maybe we played Risk or something like that with our parents. So all of this stuff, as a kid of my age, when I got into this, all of this stuff was fascinating to me. And I combed through these books as quickly as I could get them and try to make sense out of it. And
Yeah,
yeah, you can end up making sense out of it. It takes time, and effort, and as evidenced by the fact that we still talk about it. I think this document's
right,
real value is putting it all in one place and hopefully making
right.
it a little less
Taking all those little
misunderstood.
footnotes and the subtables and putting them all into order and stuff in here with it. Right, exactly. It's a great document. Uh,
Right.
if I ever met this guy, I'm going to shake his hand because he definitely put a lot of work into putting all this stuff together.
It sure did.
All right. Well, we'll start out here with Encounters Combat Initiative. Right, determine if either or both parties are surprised. Um, I've I've got my own video on surprise. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that one yet. That I did probably a couple years back now. Um, where newer systems just say the dungeon master determines if they're surprised or not. Whereas here it left it up to a die roll. Each side roll a d6 to figure out if one side or the other or both were surprised. In and of itself, hey, that sounds really simple, but there's some nuances to it for dungeon masters to use. Um, a roll of one or two indicates a surprise. Right? I didn't really figure this out till later on that one is surprise, two is complete surprise, which seems to be, wouldn't it be the other way around? But because of the way surprise works, when you're calculating for how long you're surprised for, the math doesn't work if you work one as complete surprise, two is not, it's just surprise. It's got to be one and then two, so that at least you get a segment in there with the complete surprise where you're flat-footed, basically. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And if I can interject on that,
Go for
that's
it.
I think that's an important distinction, and it's an area that gets some confusion. But if you go back into OD&D supplements, you'll realize that at least I believe in the alternative combat system, you'll end up in it's very clear that a one is surprise and a two is complete surprise, and they're separated in that way. And I think that being that informs and inspires AD&D rules, it's important to realize that one is surprise, two is complete surprise, as you've said, which not everybody picks up on, and that to me, even though it's not explicitly stated, is the limit of surprise segments, right? So No, a common example that people come up with to straw man why nothing makes sense or whatever is, oh, okay, so a green hag surprises on a 19 and 20 or an 18 and 20. So you're going to subtract those segments from the D6 segments, and this thing's going to be able to attack you, 45 times or something. And that's just simply not the case. I like to limit surprise segments to 2 segments, as that indicates complete surprise.
Well, I mean, and it's also listed in here as well. If you are surprised and the other party surprised you, they get a full attack routine, whatever that may be, or cast a spell if it's a fast enough spell in that surprise. If you allow that to spread it all the way out to 4, 5, or 6 segments, a simple monster, like what do they use here? I've got to pull up some examples. A giant owl surprises in 5 and 6. But if you blow that roll, it's going to have 3, 4, 5 rounds on you, and
Yeah.
well, there goes the party, right?
Right, exactly. And I think there's enough variability in surprise in general, that 2 segments being complete, and complete to me obviously means that's complete. So if it's complete, you can't uh, add to the whole if it's already whole, right? But
Right.
yeah, if you would blow that roll, you'd you'd be done. You know.
Sure. Right. And then we'll hit some of these points here. Some individuals, notably rangers, are surprised left often, 1 and 6. So there you go. I mean, a ranger would never be totally surprised. He would be surprised, but he would never be completely surprised. Um, and in the case of rangers, benefit accrues to the entire party. So with a ranger in your party will never be completely surprised. Right? You'll be surprised on the 1, but you'll never hit that 2 and 6 number of being completely surprised. As it, when I read it, that's what it says to me.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think there might be I- you know it, there might be certain situations, right? Like say a monster surprises more often, and you have to take that into account where the ranger could
Right.
potentially be surprised on a 2, and we'd either have to call that complete surprise, or we'd have to separate it out as 2 segments but not considered complete. And since there's no difference, I mean, I think it's really just academic. But yes, in ideal circumstances, Rangers
Mhm.
would only be surprised on a 1 and 6, and I assume that involves what them tracking ahead, having sense of the environment, subsuming all the things that
Yeah.
that a ranger might do,
He
right?
runs around with his head on a swivel. He never assumes that he is safe at any point in time. Right.
Exactly, and it is important to note that that benefit does accrue to the entire party, right?
Sure.
Um,
Sure. But
yeah,
conversely, with point number 2, some individuals, notably rangers, surprise others more often. 1 and 6 more often in the case of rangers, right? Does
right.
not accrue to the party. If that
Yeah,
ranger is in a group, it's the party number. But if you got a party of rangers, bam, that's a different story.
yeah, and I mean, when you look at it that way, and it's kind of hard to get here without a document like this, because you have to
Yeah.
look in the ranger's description, you have to look at the description of surprise in the PHB. Some of the tables are wrong. Then you have to compare it to the DMG, which contradicts some stuff, which is what's really nice about having footnotes and stuff in this document. But it makes a lot of sense, right? If I'm a ranger in a party, I might hear something before everybody else, and I can quickly alert them, provided the circumstances exist for that.
Right. Whereas with you and the party working together, they're making a lot of noise and you're not. So your ability to surprise kind of gets washed out by their not being quiet. Yeah.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah. And then the other part of this one, when either side uses a die other than D6 to determine surprise, you and I were talking about this. No, that was initiative you and I were talking about earlier. Convert percentages. So 1 and 8 equals 12.5%, 9 and 10 equals 90%, or something like this. And the example I use in the document is the Dwergar, which are only surprised on a 1 in 10. So they're even harder to surprise than Rangers are. Um, probably by the nature of the fact that they live underground, and if they slip up at all, they get eaten. So
Right, right. Plus when you're normally encountering them, right, you're gonna have the whole suite of underground senses, the
Mhm.
echoes off the cave walls, the infravision, and all of these things. Now, it is really interesting, but this is an example of things being added later that the DMG or Player's Handbook or Monster Manual could have never anticipated or taken into account, right?
right,
Because
because this monster wasn't with the
right.
original set. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody just adds it in a module and says, "Yeah, that's cool." That seems
Oh
like a
yeah, cool.
reasonable
Yeah.
thing to do. And then it'll end up in Monster Manual 2, and then everything that the DMG
Right.
says about
I
it.
can't surprise my party enough. Let me make a monster that surprises them more often. Yeah.
Right, right. Um, yeah, yeah. So there are times, I guess the takeaway from this is that there are times where percentages would be warranted and useful.
Where this really comes into play, though, with those numbers and the differences, is the segments lost to surprise, which we'll be covering here shortly. Um,
Right.
Neither party is surprised. Proceed to step two. So we'll assume one or the other is surprised on this. So each pip on the D6 equals one segment of inactivity due to surprise. So if you surprise on a one or a two, damn, there you go. That's it. The segment of surprise comes out of there. Duergar surprise others 1 in 6 more often, right? So instead of being surprised on a one or a two, let's see, one or two on a d6, they roll a two, and thus will be surprised for two segments. Yeah.
Right, because they have the ranger traveling with them. What Otis, right? So
Right.
normally they would only be, surprised on a
Surprised
one
on a
in
one.
six.
Yeah.
Right, right, exactly. But you have to take into account the surprise capability of the other creature, and if it's D
Yep.
sixes, it's real easy, right? So
Yeah,
if
because it
for some
washes. Yeah.
reason,
Yeah.
yeah, if I have a monster that surprises 3 and 6, and the other group has a ranger that surprises 1 in 6, we just take the 3 minus the 1 to come up with 2, and now the ranger will be surprised 2 and 6.
Right. Adds up. In cases where percentages were used, let's go back into the Duergar now because we got to add this in because that was something that came along after the D6 deal was, right? Divide the result by D6 by 16 and 2/3, rounding all fractions up. So because it's a 1 in 10 now, which is 10% chance, we got to kind of figure out how the math works out. They said we were playing D&D. They didn't say we were going to be doing math. Well, sorry, nope.
Yeah. Well, at least it's easier with calculators and screens and
Oh,
VTTs and stuff now.
virtual tabletops have simplified this immensely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Um, Automation, perfect. The Duergar roll a 12 on D%, so they were surprised for one segment, right? So that's it. They calculated it out. Divided into that 16 and 2/3, bam, the 12 is one segment. Say they had rolled higher, they could have been surprised for a little bit longer because the fraction would have been rounded. Yeah.
Right.
Here is something fairly important. If both sides are surprised, this is where it comes into, yeah, okay, well, both sides are surprised. Well, who was more surprised than the other? That's a possibility too. You have surprise, but the other side may have been completely surprised, which means you can recover a little bit and act to it. Both sides are surprised. Subtract the lesser result from the greater to determine the net amount of segments lost due to the more surprised side. Right. So you can recover.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's what I was talking about with the PHB. This is a better way to state it, but the PHB, and it used to confuse me as a kid because the math doesn't add up in that one surprise table where they compare the results of the different parties.
Well,
And what is he trying to say?
if
You know?
you looked it up, the surprise table in the first edition player's handbook was incorrect. The one that was
Exactly.
yeah, and that would cause an incredible amount of confusion. The
And
one that was
especially
printed in the Dungeon Master's Guide was the correct version, and but if you go by the way things are working and the way errata is supposed to work, subsequent editions supersede what was written in the earlier ones. So, Player's Handbook supersedes stuff that was written in the Monster Manual. Dungeon Master's Guide supersedes both of those. Yeah. So
Right.
the correction in there is the right one. And if there's a conflict of rules, refer to the one that's the later edition.
Yeah, right, right, and it may have been corrected in errata at some point or Dragon. I don't remember where it was corrected and how it was found out, or stated, officially, that it
Sure.
was wrong. But then of
I think it was
course,
a Dragon Magazine article, if I remember correctly. But
yeah, it might have been the Dragon Magazine surprise article, or at least the main one.
mhm.
And of course, it didn't help for people figuring this stuff out, that you get a wall of text after the corrected table in the DMG, and there's some strange language in there explaining how that stuff works out as well. So really, it's all super useful, but nothing was perfect there. But this document does a good job of cleaning it up, and once you've read it a couple of times,
I think
it makes perfect sense.
when Gary was writing this stuff, I think he got paid by the number of references you had to make to the dictionary. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that way. But hey, we ended up with a great vocabulary because of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we certainly did. All right, we'll kick it over to the next page a little bit here. I got it on the screen, but I can't read, and I should admit my failing and put my readers on.
I have to.
Yeah.
I don't admit it. I'll just let people think they look cool or whatever. But
So I'm not too proud. So I can admit that I've got failings. It's
yeah,
I'm humble about that.
yeah,
I don't have
the
many, mind
right.
you, but okay, yeah. Characters with dexterity reaction adjustments are individually surprised for more or less segments than the rest of their side, depending on the amount of the penalty or bonus. This is that reaction attack adjustment. That's why it said reaction/attack adjustment on the dexterity table, right? If you were surprised and you were fairly fast, you could recover from it a little bit quicker.
Right. And if you were particularly slow, you wouldn't. And that's something, I think a lot of people, when they look at the reaction adjustment, think that, it's this thing that applies. I know plenty of people have played like that back when we were kids and stuff like that, especially when 2E came around. But the reaction adjustment is not a modifier to all initiatives at all times, and all of that stuff. It has very specific use cases, that are sort of wedged right into the mechanics of initiative and surprise.
Right. Well, here's if you go back a little bit here, let me do it this way. Put his comments on here. We'll go there. Right. I'm going to have to bookmark this one and watch from the beginning. Don't worry about it. We're going to confuse everybody fully all the way through it. You can be confused in the middle as you will all the way through to the end. I've never fully grasped when he combat, at least not the minutia. Bill's segment's only important when blah, 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 right? And then his next one after that is sure, but how the F do they actually work? And you and I have talked about, other than the ADDICT document, there's another guy on the internet that kind of boiled some of this down together and house ruled a little bit about how segments and stuff work. I can't remember the guy off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Um,
that's Anthony Huso,
right,
and I think he's done just a tremendous amount of work, because his basic story, without getting too much into it, is that he picked back up AD&D. He had a bunch of friends who he had gone through college with or something, and they were now all scientists and engineers and all that. And he wanted to convince them to play this instead of
right,
5e, and he knew that some stuff wasn't going to fly.
sure,
And his
sure.
intent was to stick as closely to the rules as possible. And even if you don't agree with everything he says, he's been a great ambassador in really explaining this stuff. I think you find him at thebluebard.com.
Something like that, right? Or at least just
Yeah.
go searching for the blue bar, right? It's another reference that you can refer to try and shake all this stuff out. The more you can read about it, the more this stuff kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And for DLSD 25, we were talking about potentially putting this video up as an instant premiere on maybe my channel, and
sure.
then I can sit there and watch it with you guys, or me and George can sit there and watch it with you guys. and really
Do a
dig
rewatch
into some
because
of those.
whatever
Yeah,
comments we get after tonight that are down in the comment section, yeah, we can just rewatch the whole thing again to go back in and answer any other comments and stuff that we didn't cover during the course of of tonight's video. Right? Exactly. More than happy to do that kind of stuff. Let's get everybody to love this game.
right, right. That's what it's all about. To love it and preserve it, and the best way to do that is through knowing it. Right.
Sure. Let's see. Dexterity reaction adjustments, right? There is a part of this. Reaction bonuses do not apply to characters carrying more than light gear, right? 12-inch base movement, although reaction penalties always do.
Right, which
So,
also makes perfect sense, right?
yeah,
You can't just because you're not. So, gear is the limiting factor of your reaction adjustment without having to get into later rules like, okay, you can only have this much armor class or this much reaction adjustment if you're wearing this type of armor, things like field plate and full plate limiting maximum
right.
reaction adjustment or whatever they did. This is a lot more elegant, and it makes perfect sense. The penalties, of course, are going to apply, but they've got a sort of an Easter egg hidden in here that kind of describes, because the encumbrance table in the PHB, I want to say either page 108 or page 130. So I think it's 108, but that table in there kind of tries to explain to you the encumbrance tiers, but this lays it out a little more clearly. Uh, Unencumbered is the light gear, right? Um,
Yeah, we'll do another talk about encumbrance and stuff like this too, because it is critically important for this game as well, and that deserves time on its own.
right, right. And this document is one of the first things that really help make sense of that to people who hadn't kind of parsed it and pieced it together.
Bullet point number 6 here: a surprise character armed with a crossbow of speed can fire it in the second segment of surprise if he is surprised for more than one segment. The magic item gives him the ability to recover from surprise a little quicker. So,
Right.
yeah, you might have a fighter decked out in plate mail, movement rate of 6, so he doesn't qualify for the reaction adjustment from the dexterity table. But if he's carrying a crossbow of speed, now he does. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that makes the magic items too fantastical. When you have these types of little things and you're able to apply them properly, having a crossbow of speed, yeah, it's not always. I mean, it has other things it can do, right? But it's not always going to come into play in this particular case, because how often are you going to be completely
Sure.
surprised? But that's a wonderful perk to have if you end up in that case, right?
And the way the dice fall, it could happen at any time.
Yes, yes.
Alrighty, let's see what do we got here. During each segment of surprise, members of the non-surprise side can perform one of the following actions. Here's where we go. I like how he's laid this all out in the order he laid it out, because it explains a little bit later. Make a full round of melee attacks in one segment. Now that's one of the things that always got me, right? Something that normally took the entire round, you can do in one segment. So if you got two segments of surprise, that monster jumps out at you. He can get his claw bite once, and then you got surprised twice. He'll get you claw bite again because of
Right.
the yeah. So that
Yeah,
made
because
getting surprised really bad.
really bad, and it also can be extremely bad for the monsters, as you know. But yeah, that's something worth clarifying. Is we're basically talking about attack routines here. Rather
Right.
than just
Well, your fighter, a high enough
right,
level fighter gets surprised, and he gets three every two, or even
exactly.
higher than that. He gets two attacks around. He can get his two swings,
Yes,
and then again.
because that's his attack routine. Yep.
Right, right. Here's we got a comment here for probably for another episode, but interest in how you two each actually handle track this stuff is DM at the table. Maybe it's just memorized from years of play, but maybe you have sheets. Um, both. And here's where your virtual tabletops come in handy. As much computer automation as you can get done with this, the better. It's
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
mhm.
And for me, I've at times built little simple applications to help with some of that stuff. The VTTs do help a lot. Of course, most of them don't really
No, not for
include
first
this level
edition,
of,
but they
yeah.
can help you with keeping track of things and notes. They do the math and that kind of
Right.
thing
And
because
they give you a vehicle to manually change things,
right.
based on memory and notes and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And yeah, there are sheets available for some of that stuff. And um, Anthony Huso, again, he has some playable stuff on his
Yep.
site in PDF. He shared out through Google Drive, and there's some good stuff there.
Yep. Sure is. Or some things you note and track, and others that are just whatever super situational. Yes, that describes role playing games front to back all the way through. And this is where we get into as a good game master or dungeon master in our case here, since we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, you need to make rulings more often than you need to refer to rules and be consistent with them. If you something isn't really exactly covered by the rules, you need to do something on the fly. Go ahead and make a decision. But the next time that thing comes up, you need to rule it in the same manner.
Right, and that's really really one of the. I mean, that's kind of really the golden rule. Playing rules as written is to me it's ultimately important. But the golden rule is consistency. You know,
Well, the rules as written provide you a framework that everybody can sit down and agree on, and they have some at least some idea and understanding. If you're willy nilly throwing things out there, you're going to get some confusion out of your players. Here's another comment in here. There's a weapon speed also with surprise that makes it possible for PCs, NPCs to attack more often than normal combat. Not so much with surprise, but we'll get it if we get that far tonight. Maybe the next stream or whatever, when they actually get into combat and how weapon speed and stuff works with it. Yes, you can very well can attack more often. The only time weapon speed, if I just read this and I probably forgot all about it, matters as far as surprise and stuff goes, is with the magic items like your crossbow of speed, um, or the sort of
well,
was it sort of quickness, was it, or something like that? But yeah,
yeah, and those things
which goes
matter, and it
first no matter
also
what. Yeah,
right, and it also matters in tied initiative, which this document I believe will go through. When the
yeah.
initiative is tied, I think it says something to the effect of, when a matter of who attacks first needs to be determined in a tied initiative situation, you compare the weapon speed factors of both combatants' weapons. Um,
Mhm.
but also in surprise, there's which I think it's kind of
I think what he's getting back with this question is I have a dagger, you have a long sword. Do is that help with surprise? No, the weapon you're carrying doesn't. The only thing where it does is that is if you have a weapon ready to go. And I think I think we'll get to it here a little bit about that sort of thing.
yeah, I
Um,
think it's coming up, a missile
yeah,
weapon.
make a full round of missile attacks in one segment, or three times that rate if the missiles are ready. So longbow, I could shoot two shots in that first segment of surprise. But if I'm walking around with an arrow knocked or my crossbow loaded and you know I'm pointing it when I'm walking down the hall, bam, I can get three times the fire rate out of it based on that rule. Um, it says
Right.
that number 21 was Dungeon Master's Guide 62. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and something worth mentioning on that is that's an area that has been, I don't know whether it was deliberately or inadvertently left sort of nebulous, what the ready thing actually means and how that works, but that's an area that requires some sort of DM adjudication, right?
Yeah.
Because so let's take a crossbow, for example. A crossbow may very well be ready and ready to shoot, but it's not ready to shoot three times. It's going to have to be reloaded, right? Unless it were like one of those nifty like repeating crossbows or
Well, I mean, it's in there.
whatever.
It's in number two there. If instead the Duergar have their light crossbows cocked and loaded, they can each fire 3 bolts at poor Otis. If the
And
crossbows were not at the ready, they can still fire 1 bolt each.
right, and that's one thing that I have a little bit of trouble with here. I don't know why they chose to, or why he chose to talk about light crossbows because they're going to take a couple of. So basically,
Yeah,
each they're going to take some segments in order to reload. So you have to wonder
yeah.
if
I
it can
have
be
shot
ready.
light crossbows. You cannot reload them in 6 seconds. You can try.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think in cases like that, at least for me personally, where I diverge away from the written letter for the spirit of the game, is to say, okay, well, you've got it ready. That ready limitation is sort of the clamp on what you can do, right? So I would find it completely reasonable if, say, a thief or a magic user or something had 3 darts. He's got two in one hand and one in the other, or you have a an archer of some sort, and his quiver's right there. His bow's already ready. He's got his first
Right.
arrow knocked and trained. Maybe he gets that full benefit. And the same thing with hand axes with an expert. I think it just it sort of depends on what you can consider reasonably to be ready within
Yeah.
the context of the combat and what reasonably isn't. And sure, if it's interpreted, if the DM interprets it as yes, you've got your crossbow ready and you can go ahead and reload that crossbow because like what about a heavy crossbow, right? Obviously with a heavy crossbow you're
Well, the
not
rate of
getting
fire heavy
but one of
crossbow is
those.
1 every 2.
Yeah, you're not getting but one of those boys off, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, so you know, I just think there's room for interpretation in there, but the base rules stand to reason.
Yeah. Take 1 segment of movement, right? 1 foot basically per 1 inch of movement rate. Your rate is 12. On that surprise segment, you can move 12 feet. You can take your surprise to close to melee range if you wanted to. Yeah.
Eh,
Or
right.
duck. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it gives us some interesting. There's some interesting insight in there as well, right? So it ties it back to you can perform the melee attacks or the missile attacks at 3 times the normal rate, but if you have to do something else, like say reload a crossbow, then it sort of zooms back out to a segment is a segment, right? Or say drink a potion, retrieve a
Sure.
potion, anything like that. Of course,
Well,
there's no rules on how many segments things take, which the DM needs to adjudicate. But this is also, I find it interesting, this is also the one mention of moving in combat that doesn't take your entire turn to do, right? Or take your entire round. Because the DMG is pretty explicit in that you can close into combat, you can
yeah.
charge into combat, you can retreat, right? You can fall back and you can run. And that's sort of the limit of the movement because I think that was all sort of abstracted away, but they had a brilliant idea and a mathematical formula that follows it to where because the movement rate's being divisible by 3 and all that sort of thing. It actually mentions 1 segment of movement is your movement rate. Instead of in inches, it's your movement rate in feet, which would imply that you should be able to move in combat at least around the opponent you're engaged with as well. And VTTs show sort of, I mean, I'm getting off topic, but VTTs show the need
Well, no, it
for
does matter
some.
a little bit when it comes to this. Yeah.
Right, right. There's a need for some sort of movement in combat, and you know that's dependent upon the DM.
Sure. And here's where this comes into play where we can think about it as far as time it takes to do things. Cast a 1 segment spell or begin casting a longer spell. Reloading a cross, if you want to tie the 2 pieces together, reloading a crossbow takes a certain number of segments. How can I get off a bunch of free crossbow shots, but the wizard can't get his whole spell off in that segment? it kind of flies against one another. Yeah.
Right. Or why could somebody else not drink three potions? Right. So
Yeah.
I think the ready, at least to me, I interpret it as, it's very important to determine what's ready and what's not. And how many of that thing can be simultaneously ready without having to perform an interim action that's going to consume time.
Right.
So now maybe if you ended up for whatever reason, because we already talked about surprise and complete surprise, but if you were running your game such that one party ended up with three segments of surprise, maybe the guy can fire a crossbow bolt, reload, then fire another one, you know
Sure.
right.
Sure. Uh, right. Cast a one segment spell or begin casting a longer spell. Right. So you can whip off your magic missile because that's a one segment. But if you wanted to cast your fireball, there you go. You got to wait for the whole three segments. So you start on, on that, which of course gives the recovering party a chance to shoot at you. Yeah. Spend
Right.
one segment performing any other action that can normally be completed in 6 seconds. Example: drawing a weapon, drinking a potion, activating certain wands, etc. Now, this is important because the newer edition of Dungeons and Dragons allows you to draw a weapon while you're moving. Part of your attack action is considered pulling the weapon out to use. In AD&D First Edition, drawing a weapon was an action of itself. You couldn't do that and attack in the same round.
Right. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Which, why not? It just should take, you should be maybe go last in a round or something. But it depends on how you want to adjudicate how things, there's where the initiative timing, and not your initiative, round timing and stuff, initiative timing, how that kind of played out. You can see why it was experimented with several times in the Dragon magazine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
we'll talk
even
about
like
that some night too. We'll sit down and we'll go over Lenlikovka's changes and stuff that he had put out, and some of that stuff that makes kind of a little bit of sense. Drinking a
right.
potion. I don't. The potion's got to be maybe this big because you cannot chug in 6 seconds, right? You're down my. It take no. You'd be spitting that back out.
I can demonstrate the best I can do if any.
Let's all right. Let's play beer hunter. Line them all up in front of us, and yeah.
Yeah.
All right. E, an individual who, due to a reaction bonus, is surprised for fewer segments than the rest of his side can only perform actions D, 3 to 5 above. He can't um, make a full round of melee attacks or make a full round of missile attacks, but he can take a movement. He can start casting a spell, or he can do things like chuck a potion, employ his shield, or things like this. So 3 to 5, right? So you're surprised, but being you're fast, you recover a little quicker on that recovery. You get to do something while the rest of your party is still flat-footed. Yeah,
Right, right, exactly. And to go back real quick to what Cooley's saying here, yeah, there's a couple of ways to interpret that, and I think what they did is they chose the light crossbow because it has a rate of fire of one, so that they could
yeah,
triple it to three, without considering though that that there's some space between it being ready, which we've talked about. And if anyone's game, if that's not the case, that's fine. It's open for interpretation. With a bow, with a rate of fire of two, its full round of missile attacks in one segment would be two, and you would essentially triple that, right? So what that amounts to is an arrow every second. Now, I mean, we've seen that kind of thing in movies,
oh,
but at the but at the same
what was
time,
was it? Was it Hawk the Slayer?
yeah, or maybe you can fire the do the triple arrow fire, right?
Yeah,
I think really the takeaway is just to establish something that you and your players understand as ready, or readiness for a
right.
particular weapon. Right, like for a bow crossbow, it's probably loaded and pointed in general direction. Yes, for a bladed weapon, it would be drawn and in hand, and thrown weapons. Like if I have to grab a hand axe and throw it, and then reach behind my back and grab another hand axe and throw it, I shouldn't get 3 times that rate. But that's up to,
No.
the DM, and I just caution the DM to make sure that his players understand that, and what the rules are, and stay consistent.
Hmm? Let's see. Similarly, an individual who, due to a reaction bonus, is surprised for fewer segments than the rest of his side cannot be targeted by actions D1 to 2 above. Make a full round of melee attacks, make a full round of missile attacks during the segment that he is no longer surprised. So if your opponents get 2 segments of full rounds of attack, they can attack the whole party on the first one, but everybody but you on the second one.
Right, right, and I guess the inverse is true as well, right?
Right.
So
Because due to your ability to recover, now you are in defensive whatever, and their ability to, they don't have the drop on you any longer. So the surprise rules don't apply. Yeah.
right, right.
Alrighty, let's see. We'll go to the next page. Oh, I love all these references that he's got listed on here, where he read them and put them all in there. His
Yeah,
English teacher taught him well.
yes, yes, and you will note that some of the stuff is, will come from Sage Advice. Some of the stuff will come
Some
from Dragon Magazine.
and unearthed arcana for some of the rules clarifications. So one of those things is, if you, I wouldn't say ignore those rules or clarifications if you're not using those materials, or at least take them into consideration. They were put in there for a reason, for probably to handle issues that may have come up or something in gameplay. And they said, well, let's put this in the new section, or let's talk about this in this magazine article.
Right.
So once we've determined who or what is surprised, or if anybody is surprised at all, nobody's surprised, and it says go to 2, determine distance if unknown between the parties. Um, if you're not plotting things out on a map and they fling open the door and the monsters are in a small 2020 by 20, then you don't know what you're encountering. You're outdoors or something. You don't have encounter doors. You can
Right.
ignore all of Unearthed Arcana at your own peril. Yeah, there's only a couple of things that I will allow out of Unearthed Arcana. I like cantrips. I think that's a nifty idea.
I like cantrips. Yeah, I like some of the descriptions for the newly introduced weapons. I only wish that had been expanded to include descriptions for weapons that had already existed.
Sure.
I like the expansion of giant class for rangers to handle creatures that hadn't existed yet, and also
Oh,
creatures
yeah,
that were
sure.
obviously giants who um,
If all I'm
yeah.
using is the core 3 books, it doesn't matter what all those other ones are. Yeah.
Right, right. But it's helpful to have it laid out. There's a
Just
few
like any
things in
other
there.
book, any other reference in this game, use what you want out of it. There's no rule that says you have to use all of it.
Right. The non-human deities is useful too.
Mhm. All right, let's see. What do we got here? Outdoors, base encounter distance is 6 inches to 24 inches, or 6d4, right? If either party is surprised, subtract the larger number of surprise segments from the distance, right? You've you got a little closer to them or something like that. But one needs to remember that inches outdoors is yards, not feet. Your opponent could be a long way off.
Right, and it's important to remember that that's with respect to range and not things like area of effect.
Every effect on spells and stuff like that, sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
he says also terrain may further modify the encounter distance, scrub, forest, and marsh. 33 was Dungeon Master's Guide, page 49, right. Some of this makes a little bit of sense. You know, you're in a forest. There, you should be able to get a little closer to your opponents or whatever before you actually notice them. Out in the plain, oh my, we can see them miles off. But in areas where there's some cover and stuff, it is possible to just walk, How many times have you gone deer hunting and walked around the path and then bam, there's a deer right there? Or actually, outside of deer season, walked around the path and there's one standing right there.
Yeah, yeah. That we have feral hogs down here, so yeah, we've got some deer too, but
Mhm.
what we hunt the feral hogs, and that's year round,
Yeah.
and you'll go
Mm,
traipsing through the brush and whatnot, and then there would just be one there.
yeah.
And it's pretty interesting because they're not very friendly. Um, but yeah, I think that makes sense. And the other thing is, it sort of goes to show you that all of this stuff kind of ties together. The encounter distance ties together with the surprise, ties together
Yep.
with the initiative in a logical way. It's just unfortunate, as you can see from the footnotes, that it's not really all in one place.
They got to go
Unless
all over the
somebody
place looking for
makes,
that kind of stuff because of the way it's
yeah,
covered.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you might never notice it. You know.
Yeah. Indoors, the base encounter distance is 5 inches to 10 inches, D6 plus 4. Now, line of sight, right? Some of this is going to, and some of the notes that they list down in here make some changes to it. Line of sight, this is unobstructed and the light is involved. Distance possible termination and another party is present is virtually infinite. You can see a light coming down the hall, and sorry, whatever surprise you may have thought you had was spoiled by the light you're carrying. Yeah,
Yeah, right, right, and
yeah,
and a lot of this stuff, I think, with encounter distances and all that. If you have something specifically planned that's uh, not really dynamic. So, say the party of adventurers opens a door and no sound has been made or anything, and there's a group of goblins throwing dice at a table or something like that. The encounter distance is going to be evident. If there's an ambush set up and the
right.
party happens to walk into it, the encounter distance is going to be evident. For all those cases when it's not, this type of stuff is real useful to have. And I
Yeah,
and I
that
think it might be tangential, but it's important to realize that if a party's running around with the light source and you've got infravision bearing creatures or other creatures who don't need a light source, I mean the encounter distance is basically going to happen whenever the opposing creatures who don't need a light source want it to happen, right?
right.
Because they will see you from a mile away.
Yeah, well past the range of your light down the hall. Right. Noise. If one party is making considerable noise, which is discernible by the other party, right? Yeah, you can move fairly quietly in armor and stuff, but it does take a lot of work to silence your gear. I did spend a little bit of time, in the Marine Corps, and all your stuff, no matter how much you've tried to tie things do rattle a little bit as you're moving. So make a noise, you know, um, that's a big plus as far as help determining your encounter distances. Allowing distance to be 1 to 4 inches before discovering by the noisy party. So you're making a little bit of noise and something's coming the other way. Chances are they may have a chance to surprise you.
Yeah, and a lot of dungeon dwelling creatures and animals and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're going to have vastly superior hearing or other senses as compared to humans. So you kind of need to take that into account too. So you might think as an adventurer that you're being quiet, but that doesn't mean that the hellhound around the corner doesn't hear you, doesn't smell you. You know,
Well, there's some other things too that's not even put in there. Odors and things like that as well. Right.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
All righty. Actual area, and this is what we talked about a little bit earlier there. If the encounter party is in a small area, distance between the two can be no greater than the maximum distance possible for the discovery. You open up the door into a 40 by 40 room. Doesn't matter what you roll on the dice. The farthest away your encounter is going to be is 40 feet. Yeah. Okay.
Right, right. Yeah, and that just basically, I mean, some of that is obviously makes sense,
Yeah.
right? But in some cases, that actually matters as a calculable thing.
Right. So, yeah, even though there's a bunch of monsters in the room, you still want a dice for it. Are they
Right.
at the door or on the opposite side of the room? Which makes a whole lot of difference as far as your actions and stuff that you're going to want to take during those segments and stuff. Where they're at. Do I have to close them? Can I get them from the door, or are they standing right there at the door? We don't have time for anything. Yeah. Planned or unplanned appearance, the sudden precipitation of one party upon the other due to any number of factors. It says here teleportation, dimension door spell, other magical means, shoot, etc. will cause distance similar to that found where the actual area is a factor. Right? Somebody dimension doors inside the room, you know, to be honest with you, I would probably give the dimension door would be automatic surprise on whoever's inside. The only one
Y-
that would have to roll for surprise would be the characters that are dimension dooring in. Were they
y-
surprised by something being in there or not? Yeah.
I agree completely, and in fact, this particular bullet point here or whatever, this numbered point, um, led me to want to say the same thing. There are just going to be some situations where surprise is evident. You know, surprise. You can think of surprise as like later systems, skill checks, or even anything from some of the later 1E books. There's some things if I'm a bowyer or a fletcher or even the secondary skills table, or if I'm an acrobat or something, there's some things I'm just going to be able to do. And surprise is similar. If
Mhm.
right, if somebody dimension doors right on top of you, or the example from the light source that we were talking about earlier, if they see you a mile away, they might only have a chance to surprise you, but you're not going to have a chance to surprise them, for
Right.
example. So you have to judiciously apply this stuff.
Mhm.
You don't have to, because you can have perfect fun by just randomly determining it all. But I
Yeah.
usually roll for surprise depending on the circumstances of the encounter, if I know what they are.
Yeah. Let's willingly suspend disbelief and let dice run the whole game. Right.
Yeah, which plenty of people do.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah,
And you're right. That's fun in and of itself.
right.
Right. Surprise can only be a factor in close encounter situations. If either or both parties are surprised, the distance must either 1 inch to 3 inches, or it must be less, as determined under actual area modifier. Thus, if the actual area were 40 by 60 room, if surprise exists, the distance between the parties will be 1 to 3 inches. So, 40 by 60 room, no more than halfway across. Yeah.
Right, and that's important, right? So it can only be in close encounter situations. So
Hmm.
in order to surprise somebody, uh, here you basically have to be close enough to them for that surprise to have some sort of actual surprising effect. And that's what it lays out here. But again, it's inches. So outdoors, close encounter situations are much farther than, say, close quarter combat situations indoors, right?
And here with is where the game gives us some clarification on what they mean by light.
Right.
Illumination factor or visual capability of the concerned parties will affect encounter distance as follows. A light source reliance limits the encounter distance to twice the normal vision radius of the source, 2 times the radius of light source. So if you got a 40-foot lantern, 80 foot, which in a dungeon, 80 foot is a long hallway.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure is.
Mhm. Infravision and or ultravision generate operate only to the stated limit of their range and limit encounter distance accordingly. So it doesn't matter what your sight range is. It's not the same. It isn't treated the same as a light source. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All righty. Well, that's mostly on surprise. Been going at it for about an hour here. I don't know if you want to continue and we'll talk about declarations and stuff like that, or we want to save that for another night.
Yeah, that's up to you. I mean, I can go for longer. I don't know what anybody else wants. But now we've got some people showing up, huh? Yeah, that's totally up to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we want to stretch this out as for as as many views as we could get out of this. So why don't we save for our declarations and stuff like that for another video?
Yeah,
Um,
all right. Yeah,
finish any
yeah.
sort of commentary we have on surprise. Now, if you've got it open and ready to go, flash up that page out of the player's handbook for the surprise table.
Oh, right. Yeah. Let me.
And let me see if I can. Ooh, because I've got it open as surprise in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah, and that encumbrance table is page 101. It's 101 to 102. So I was a little bit uh
Right.
off
We'll
on
def
that.
we'll definitely do a video on encumbrance and stuff like that because resource management, I mean, is one of my favorite parts of the game. I think it's critically important as far as the game stuff goes. I think that deserves its own hour-long discussion.
Yeah, I agree. Completely. Yeah, where's this surprise page at? I can't remember that offhand. I should know it because it's
Um,
infamous.
yeah, I would happen to
Yeah.
be open to the correct page in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Let me see.
Yeah,
Where's
so it's 102, 103 in PHB.
Right, there is. This is the Dungeon Master's Guide that I have open there. Right, there's the correct table.
Right.
Right.
And that the example there, the first example is fairly straightforward. That second example is confusing as all get out, and I'm and I'm still not sure that it was corrected in or correct in earlier prints of the DMG. You know, you have to read it pretty closely. Um,
Oh
but
yeah, I'm not sure what print this is. Do you have the page open from Player's Handbook?
yes, the page in Player's Handbook is it starts on 102. So right after the encumbrance stuff, this is where they basically go through, you know, encumbrance, movement, time, and distance, and
Okay, I'm
provision and
pretty
stuff
close.
for
Here we go.
players. Yeah,
There we go.
yeah, it's right there.
All right, that one was incorrect.
Yep.
So the one in the Dungeon Master's Guide supersedes that one. So if you're looking at an incorrect one, it would certainly confuse you on trying to figure out what it was done.
Yes,
And there's
and
your
I think
surprise difference dice and all that stuff was explained up in there, but it's just a little table showing you what it is, you know. Whereas an explanation, monster has a 4 and 6 chance of surprise, and the monster has 2 and 6. Six-sided die is rolled for the party, another for the monster. Both sides could be surprised, neither or whatever, and that's how you to figuring out what it is. Now, there's a point that I was thinking about making, and I even made a note, and I forgot to read off on it. Who rolls for who? Some of that there was a lot of flexibility on who rolled for who. Um, did the players roll for their surprise on the monsters, and the DM rolled for the monster surprise on the players, or was it reversed? The players rolled to see if the monster surprised them, and then the DM rolled to see if the player surprised the monster. You know, there was both ways had been played that I'm aware of over the years.
yeah, and it's also been played where the DM makes all those rolls,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Um,
Yeah, early
yeah,
on, the players hardly saw any rolls.
yeah, yeah. But for me, I like the players to be in control of their own destiny for things that can go horribly wrong to an extent for them. So typically, I'll have them roll their surprise die, and then I'll roll the surprise die for the monsters, right?
Sure.
But yeah, you can do it any way you want.
Excellent. Let me go with this here. This is a fantastic discussion. I'm glad we had time to talk about all of this and get some involvement here, some questions and stuff answered. Hopefully, we get some comments and stuff. I'll leave it up to you to decide what day it is we want to get together and discuss the comments and stuff that we've had and rehash this stuff again on your channel.
Yeah,
Um,
that could be anytime. Really, for the most part, I don't have a lot going on over the next couple of
yeah, here
days
we
or
go.
whatever.
Here's a little comment on there. One of you, I always had players roll their own surprise. Osric Phillips says, yeah. Then the Osric rule set in for um, fantasy grounds when you roll the die, that was the monsters. Yeah.
Right, right. And I think it was one of the more clever things that Ozark did.
Mhm.
Um, take that for what it's worth, but hey,
Well,
at least
that's
they
their
preserved some
interpretation,
stuff.
right? And they're
Uh,
entitled to their interpretation. Yeah.
yes, yes, exactly, and it sort of makes sense and to an extent. Um, and what's the plan? We want to continue these on
Yeah.
a Thursday basis,
Yeah.
or
Thursday sounds good to me. If it's okay with you, we'll do this on Thursday nights. We'll continue talking about first edition Dungeons and Dragons on prime time Thursday nights because it
yeah,
deserves no less.
right, yeah, and that works for me. I'll make sure it's blocked out, and maybe I don't know if you have things going on. I know you've probably got something going on tomorrow, right? And
Yeah,
I mean,
Friday
do you
night I've
want?
got a first edition Dungeons and Dragons game that goes on Friday nights, right?
Yeah, yeah. If you want to be involved when I do the instant premiere, I'll do it whenever it works for you.
Yeah,
And I would
just send me a
imagine you'd
message and
want to
we'll
be
hash out
there.
a
And
day.
yeah, yeah, that's what I'll do. Because we can get on that sometime before the Thursday show, and we can go through, and that gives us an opportunity to answer things that we weren't able to cover specifically. But it also gives us the opportunity to talk with the viewers and see what they want to see more of, and
Yeah,
let them
and
kind of
give us
guide
some
it a little
input.
bit.
What would they like us to discuss more of and help with? Absolutely. I like to do things that way.
Yeah, yeah,
If I
me
talk
too.
about what they're interested in, then they'll tune in. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
yeah. Well, this was great. Good. I appreciate you joining me. And
Absolutely, thank you.
but at the minimum, it'll be next Thursday. But between now and we'll do the premiere on yours.
Yeah, that'll
All
work.
right. Well,
All right,
thanks a
and
lot.
yeah,
Let me go
any
ahead.
comments, anybody, yeah,
But yeah,
drop them on
drop
this
them in
channel.
the comments and we'll cover them.
Yeah, hit us up on whatever. Yes.
All righty. Well, I'll go ahead and close this out and talk at you a little bit later. Thanks again for joining me there, Doom Swords.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining me on this little trek back down first edition Dungeons and Dragons roll. Um, if you like this video, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. If you have suggestions for future episodes, please leave a comment below. I'm more than happy to try and talk about all this different stuff in a game that I absolutely love. And thanks again for joining, and we will see you again soon.